Greenleaf Printing and Designs has stupendous signage, printed and embroidered apparel, and promotional products for you. They're at 5526 Burkhart Road in Dayton and on the web at greenleafprinting.com. Greg Hunter of Dayton, Ohio, originally, am I correct? Dayton, Kettering.
Dayton, yes. Kettering, yes.
You were out in
a resident of Kettering and Dayton eventually.
Okay. And you were in Denver at this time?
I'm in Denver, actually a little kind of a mountain suburb kind of west of Denver.
Okay.
Up the hill, as it is said in Denver.
South Park country.
Closer to South Park country, yes.
Okay. Is there any resemblance in the South Park caricatures to any of the communities there?
Well, I don't really know. Maybe me, per se. Kenny, okay. I don't know, but no.
Well, anyway, I want to talk to you about the subject, something you're pretty passionate about that I've noticed, the subject of sprawl and what your professional / educational experience brought you to realize this was a problem, and how big of a problem is it in Dayton, and what can be done, what could be done, what will be done, or can anything be done?
Well, in the end, I don't think anything can be done until there's a true, look at what the causes, effects, and why these things occur.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think sprawl is one of those things that you come to the conclusion that it's not a good thing in Dayton, and it's doubly not a good thing in Dayton because of, how Dayton is formed and how it came together. So, Dayton has what I call no barrier to stupidity in the respect that if you look at a lot of communities that are built on when you build up against state lines, or you build up against large rivers, or you build up against, oceans, a lot of people want green space along with those other amenities that are already occurring. So in Dayton, you have none of that barrier. You don't have large rivers you have to contend with, and you can just spread out all over with very little, cost associated with it. And the country kind of thrives on sprawl. You get tax dollars from gas monies, you get tax dollars from citizens, and they want to expand. And, those housing developments kind of have pro-marketing people working for them. I mean, they have the realtors, they have the banks, and they have, a vested interest. And once the houses are all sold, they end up just being taxpayers that nobody cares about, so they go on to the next development. And developers are the ones that kind of finance people getting elected. If you look at the people that get elected, a lot of them have to do with either real estate or banking or very close ties to those things. So there's a lot of things inside sprawl that kind of come together. Plus a lot of communities overcharge for like basic services so they can build more investment, i.e. they build bigger wastewater treatment plants, they build bigger water treatment plants for growth. Well, Dayton has, not a growing population, it just has a shifting population.
But we do have a growing population of buildings, and that's something I read. I'm not sure who put the study out, but there's been a lot of buildings being born, but there's not as many people being born as quick as the buildings are being born. I'm not sure who put it out, but it was said that there's been an increase of 41% of space that's been built on and occupied, while we've had this decrease of 6% of the population. So in a time where we're seeing municipalities deal with debt, doesn't the created sprawl infrastructure, if you will, make it almost impossible for our society to get out of that kind of debt? Because we're like, oh, we got to keep feeding this beast. If we don't feed this beast, then the beast is, going to kill us all. Meanwhile, we keep making it exponentially more expensive for every future generation, based upon the model of growth and development.
Well, yeah, growth and progress, and yeah, I don't disagree. I mean, there's plenty of studies to say out there that we haven't had. We've had a somewhat expanded population, but as the population expanded by 7%, the land use area taken up by that, it's like 282%. So as people will say, well, they want land and they want area, what they don't recognize is that as you put in more and more miles of water lines, water pipes, and all those things to spread out, as you provide services to a spread out community, those costs are going to ever increase as things go bad. I mean, if you put, and I understand trying to get away from people at a certain extent, but if you design communities with plenty of green space around them, like if you had the money, everybody would probably live in New York off Central Park. You don't have to cut the grass and you get all the benefits thereof. So, you know, I can't imagine that, you know, the people that love cities all migrated to New York and the people that don't love cities, you know, migrated to Dayton. Again, also your statement about buildings being born, I mean, you know, the infrastructure in Dayton was already invested in. And, you know, all those skyscrapers now are going to end up being empty. I mean, but then you're building with the blessing of the city of Dayton, you know, Austin Road, and they have a joint tax agreement down there to move people down to that end of town because it's growing. But you also covered over some of the best farmland, and, you know, so, and you're also building schools down there. So you're increasing tax base. Well, it's being sold as, well, you know, it's a place to live and a place to grow your family, but you're going to have to pay more taxes to build schools while we tear them down other places. I don't see why that's a good thing from a regional perspective. But, you know, part of the history, I think, with Sprawl is the history associated with racism and also the history associated with how banks finance buildings and how people go about, you know, creating wealth in this country. And it's, like I said, it seems to be more of shifting personnel because nothing quite new is showing up. Now they'll lay claim to the GE facilities that are being built, but, you know, how many other facilities went out? General Motors and all the other things. So it's a net loss when you really look at it, especially.
Yeah, and isn't GE, they won't be paying taxes, if I'm correct, for quite a while. They got an abatement to come into town.
And they probably will not be paying the same kind of wages that General Motors paid. Or, you know, just as what, Thompson Hine Flory just moved out of downtown Dayton and moved to where else? I mean, Austin Road. So it's an interesting dynamic, though. I think a lot of those buildings that were owned by downtown were probably owned by people out of the state that really don't understand the politics of that. They bought a losing investment.
Sure.
Because the people inside, you know, Dayton and the Montgomery County were moving tax dollars to grow other places to make those local people wealthy. And the people that are out-of-state owners kind of got, I mean, that's the way I kind of look at it from a gross macro view. I don't know exactly who.
Well, that's really the only way you can really talk about the subject, at least unless we break it down to a micro and then talk about that. But you're someone that I've read who believes in the concept of peak oil. Okay.
Correct.
And at what point do you believe, or do scientists, or is kind of the agreed upon geologists number, when everything's going to start to change? Because, I mean, we're already seeing, you know, like people cheering the return of $3.50 a dollar for a gallon gas. So, I mean, I've heard people, you know, seen them on Facebook like, oh, I'm so glad the gas is down to $3.50 a gallon, you know. And they're, you know, it's going up and up and up, and then it'll go down a little bit, and then up and up, to eventually to where the 6,000-mile just-in-time food supply chain is completely impossible to operate, and the sprawl infrastructure, because at $7 a gallon, which is normal in many parts of the world, that, you know, driving to Best Buy for a packet of colored paper out in Beaver Creek to the Office Depot becomes a ridiculous proposition.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think you're on to a lot of things there. I mean, Sprawl's another one of those indicators that the reason you're kind of against it is because in the future you won't be able to maintain the infrastructure, asphalt, concrete, steel, because oil is a finite resource. And yes, you know, I brought this up a long time ago, and now you're actually seeing, in the marketplace, the results. I mean, we were actually at peak oil, and peak oil is not when you're, when it's running out. It's when you can't get maximum production anymore. Mm-hmm. The highest production rate we could ever get. And really that production, we're on a plateau, and that occurred in 2006. So if you look at the recent headlines about the oil being released from the SPR, our Strategic Petroleum Reserves. Now, it has all been told to me over the last 10 years that Saudi Arabia has 4 million barrels of oil ready to be put on the market. Well, they can't do it. And so what you're seeing as Libya's oil drops off, that we have to go to the SPR to even maintain the oil in its current format so that we can hopefully not go back into recession. So instead of like planning for the future where, yes, that packet of paper arrives by electrified rail in downtown Dayton and we can either ride our bikes or take some alternative form of transportation as we've concentrated to live, we are going to pay more and more taxes to maintain an infrastructure we can't really afford. Just like we couldn't afford houses that went up to $500,000 when you don't have the jobs to support it. It just makes sense to me, but it doesn't make sense to those in charge because they want the things to continue and they want to stay in power. So it's a very, very tough thing. The only problem is we as a society go down together with these kinds of decisions.
Sure. And do you see locally in the Miami Valley there being a fight at all costs type of cognitive dissonance towards this subject, and in America as well? I mean, I think it's quite an American thing, but I haven't heard any leaders whatsoever in any form of government in the Miami Valley, correct me if I'm wrong, talk about rearranging the way we live in order to be able to afford to sustain our society.
Well, no, nobody likes to talk about that because, it's an interesting thing. There's not too many people that are like realists. A lot of people have rose-colored glasses, and and they have they look at technology, like the technology that enables us to talk on this video chat, as the same thing as energy production. So there's a loss of what is considered a science-based approach to life. Nobody understands where energy comes from. And I think there's a disconnect between how oil is pervasive in our society and how energy gets transported. I mean, it's almost like magic. So as fewer and fewer people work in the energy industry and are exposed to it, I think the public gets lost and thinks that man will come up with some solution, just like the iPod, for our energy problems.
So far, it seems to be M16s and Predator drones.
Well, yes. And, the fighting for resource wars is going to, continue to occur. And we're probably the most prevalent actor in that arena. I mean, we want our oil, and our oil is in their sand. It's a beautiful thing that they have all the oil, the Muslim countries, and we use it at such a high rate. I mean, it almost makes me believe in God at a certain level. It's so funny. It's almost ironic. And I have to laugh at it at a certain level, but in the end, it's not going to be very funny. And we need to kind of be innovative and be Americans and live within our means. And I think there's a lot of positives for the inner city of Dayton, Ohio. The only thing is my concern is that the grasping for business as usual, and as the economic things contract, people will make decisions that aren't the right decisions to maintain Dayton as a viable agricultural area, as an energy producing area, and as we own our own resources. I'm afraid that the people in charge will sell these assets off, and people of Dayton won't make the investment in buying locally produced agriculture and products as prices get higher and higher.
Yeah, because I seem kind of worried. I hear a lot of political circles right now, people talking like, Dayton has so much water. Boy, do we have so much water. We got the water. We're the water capital. We're the water Saudi Arabia. And a lot of this talk seems to be like, yeah, like there's like leading type thinker types have put these thoughts out, and then the political